History isn't just a collection of dates and dusty old textbooks. It's a wild, unfiltered tapestry of moments so strange, so utterly unbelievable, they feel ripped straight from the pages of a fantasy novel. Picture this, an entire town vanishing overnight without a trace, a rainstorm of blood-red droplets terrifying a medieval village, or a 2,000-year-old mechanical device so advanced it defies its own time. These aren't plot twists from a sci-fi movie. They're real events etched into the past, waiting to unravel your understanding of what's possible. Think about the last time you heard a story that made you stop and say, "No way that actually happened." Now multiply that by 30, because today we're diving into some of the most mind-bending, spine-tingling moments in history, events so bizarre, they'll make you question whether reality itself has a sense of humor. From spontaneous human combustion to entire armies disappearing into thin air, these aren't just oddities. They're mysteries that have baffled scientists, historians, and skeptics for centuries. And the strangest part, every single one of them is documented, witnessed, and utterly unexplainable. This isn't just a list of weird facts. It's a journey into the unknown, a spotlight on the moments when history took a sharp left turn into the unbelievable. Imagine standing in a crowded square in 19th century France as a shower of live frogs rained from the sky, or uncovering an ancient map so accurate it shouldn't exist for another 500 years. These stories aren't just about the what, they're about the how. How did these things happen? Why do they still unsettle us today? And what do they reveal about the world we think we know? Strap in, because by the time we're done, you won't just question history, you'll question everything. In the sweltering summer of 1518, the streets of Strasbourg erupted into a nightmare that defied all reason. It began with a single woman, Frau Trophia, who stepped into the square and began to dance not with joy, but with a frantic, unstoppable intensity. Within days, dozens more joined her, their bodies convulsing to an invisible rhythm, their feet bleeding, their lungs gasping for air. By the end of the month, nearly 400 people were caught in this macabre frenzy, dancing without rest, without food, some collapsing dead from exhaustion or heart failure. The city's desperate solution: build stages and hire musicians, believing the dancers needed to get it out of their system. But the music only fueled the madness. Contemporary accounts paint a scene of pure terror, hollow-eyed figures, their clothes soaked in sweat, their limbs twitching like marionettes as priests and physicians stood helpless. Some blamed divine punishment, pointing to the wrath of Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers, though exorcisms did nothing. Others whispered of curses or demonic possession. But modern historians have dug deeper. Could it have been mass hysteria, a psychological domino effect in a city already buckling under famine and disease? Or was it ergot poisoning, the same fungus linked to witch-trial hallucinations, creeping into the town's rye bread and twisting reality into a waking nightmare? The strangest part, this wasn't an isolated incident. Medieval Europe recorded at least 10 similar outbreaks, as if the very air carried some invisible contagion of movement. Yet no answer fully explains why entire communities would dance themselves to the brink of death. Was it biology, psychology, or something far older lurking in the shadows of human instinct? The dancing plague remains a grotesque open question, a reminder that history's mysteries often resist tidy explanations, and that sometimes the past doesn't just whisper. It screams. In the quiet villages of Tanganyika, now modern-day Tanzania, an outbreak unlike any other rippled through the schools in 1962. It started innocently enough, a few girls giggling in a classroom, but this wasn't ordinary laughter. It was uncontrollable, infectious, spreading from one child to another like wildfire. Within weeks, hundreds of students were consumed by fits of hysterical laughter, their bodies convulsing for hours, even days, unable to stop. Schools shut down. Entire villages were paralyzed, and no one, not doctors, not elders, could explain why. At first, authorities suspected mass poisoning or even a sinister plot. But tests revealed no toxins, no traces of illness. The laughter seemed to have no physical cause. Instead, psychologists pointed to something far more elusive: the power of the human mind under pressure. Tanganyika had just gained independence from colonial rule, and the weight of rapid societal change bore down on these communities. Children, already navigating strict school environments, became unwitting vessels for this collective release. Stress, fear, the unspoken tension of a nation in transition, it all erupted as laughter, a bizarre coping mechanism gone viral in the most literal sense. Witnesses described scenes straight from a surreal nightmare, classrooms echoing with manic giggles, teachers powerless to restore order, parents carrying their exhausted children home only for the laughter to spread to neighboring towns. The epidemic lasted 8 months, vanishing as mysteriously as it began, but its legacy lingers as one of history's most striking examples of psychogenic illness where emotions, not germs, become the contagion. Could it happen again? Modern researchers warn that in our hyper-connected world, the conditions are ripe. Social media amplifies emotions at lightning speed, and societal stressors, pandemics, political upheaval, create tinderboxes for mass psychological phenomena. The Tanganyika Laughter Epidemic wasn't just a quirky footnote. It was a mirror held up to humanity, revealing how fragile the line between mind and body truly is. And perhaps how laughter, the very thing that bonds us, can also unravel us when the world feels too heavy to bear. History has seen its fair share of bizarre battles, but few can match the sheer absurdity of the Great Emu War of 1932. Picture this: Australia in the grip of the Great Depression, with struggling farmers watching helplessly as thousands of emus, giant, flightless birds standing over 6 feet tall, invaded their land, devouring crops and trampling fences. Desperate, the farmers turned to the government for help. And what did the government do? They sent in the military with machine guns. Yes, you heard that right. The Australian Army, armed with Lewis guns and a mission to cull the emu population, marched into the outback like they were facing an enemy invasion. But the emus, it turned out, were far more formidable opponents than anyone anticipated. These birds weren't just fast, they could sprint at 30 miles per hour. They were also surprisingly tactical. Soldiers reported emus splitting into small groups, dodging bullets with almost comical agility, and scattering into the brush only to regroup moments later. One frustrated major famously described the campaign as trying to hit feathered tanks. After days of failed attempts, with ammunition running low and morale lower, the military admitted defeat. The emus had won, but behind the absurdity lies a deeper story. The emu invasion wasn't just random chaos, it was a collision of human ambition and nature's resilience. Farmers, encouraged by government incentives, had pushed into emu territory, clearing land and disrupting the birds' natural migration patterns. When drought struck, the emus simply followed their instincts, heading toward the only available food and water, the farms. The war was less a battle against birds and more a humbling lesson in unintended consequences. Today, the Great Emu War is remembered with a mix of embarrassment and humor, a reminder that nature doesn't always bend to human will. But it also raises a question: who were the real invaders, the emus just trying to survive, or the humans who reshaped the land without considering the consequences? Either way, it's a story that proves truth really is stranger than fiction. And if you ever find yourself facing an emu, maybe just let it have the right of way. On the afternoon of October 17, 1814, the streets of London's St. Giles neighborhood became the stage for one of history's most surreal disasters. Inside the Horseshoe Brewery, a massive vat containing over 300,000 gallons of porter beer burst with an explosive force, shattering adjacent tanks in a chain reaction. The result, a 10-foot-high tidal wave of dark, frothy beer crashing through the brewery walls, flooding basements, ripping apart buildings, and drowning entire families in their homes. Witnesses described the scene as apocalyptic, a roaring river of alcohol carrying debris, furniture, and even bodies through the narrow alleys. The human toll was devastating. 8 people lost their lives, including a mother and child crushed by a collapsing wall, and others who suffocated in the beer-flooded cellars where they'd sought refuge. But amid the tragedy unfolded scenes of grim absurdity. Survivors waded through waist-deep beer, some desperately trying to save their belongings, others realizing the liquid was free, filling buckets and cups to drink. One elderly woman reportedly drowned after refusing to leave her basement, declaring she'd die happy submerged in ale. In the aftermath, the brewery found itself at the center of a legal storm. Families of the victims demanded justice, but the courts ruled the flood an act of God, sparing the owners from financial ruin. The tragedy did, however, expose the dangers of rapid industrial expansion in crowded cities. London's breweries had grown recklessly, stacking enormous vats in fragile structures with little oversight, a cost-cutting gamble that, in this case, proved deadly. What lingers most about the London beer flood isn't just the spectacle of destruction, but the eerie way it straddles comedy and catastrophe. A disaster born from humanity's oldest vice, where celebration and mourning collided in the same frothy tide. And if you walk through St. Giles today, beneath modern pubs and offices, the ground still remembers. Archaeologists have found traces of the flood chemical signatures of that doomed batch of porter, seeped into the earth, a ghostly reminder that history's strangest moments often leave the deepest stains. Imagine waking up every night to a sound no one else can hear, a relentless, droning hum vibrating through your skull, shaking you from sleep, following you through the day like a ghost in your bones. This isn't science fiction. For decades, residents of Taos, New Mexico, have reported exactly that, an eerie, low-frequency noise known as the Taos Hum, a phenomenon with no clear source, no scientific consensus, and no escape for those who hear it. The accounts are chillingly consistent. Victims describe it as a distant engine idling, a refrigerator's buzz magnified, or a pulse throbbing beneath the earth. Some feel it in their teeth, others in their chests, but here's the twist: only about 2% of Taos' population can hear it at all. Scientists rushed to investigate, setting up microphones and seismic sensors across the desert. Yet every test came back the same: silence, no detectable vibration, no geological anomaly, no industrial machinery to blame. The hum existed only in the minds or ears of the hearers. Naturally, conspiracy theories erupted. Was it a secret military project, some underground antenna array pumping out subliminal frequencies? Others pointed to natural causes, like subterranean caves resonating like giant flutes or electromagnetic waves from solar activity. But the most unsettling theory, that the hum isn't external at all. Neurologists suggest it could be a form of spontaneous cochlear emission, where the inner ear generates its own sound, a phantom noise, a glitch in the human hardware. Yet for those who live with it, no explanation dulls the torment. Interviews with hearers reveal lives fractured by the hum's persistence: sleepless nights, migraines, even suicides. One woman described moving 5 times across state lines, only for the hum to follow her, as if it were tied to her very being. Another spent thousands soundproofing his home, only to realize the noise was coming from inside him. The Taos Hum defies logic. It's a riddle wrapped in silence, a reminder that even in our age of satellites and sensors, some mysteries don't just resist solving. They burrow into us, whispering that the world is stranger than we know. And perhaps that some truths aren't found in data, but in the unshakable certainty of those who hear the unseen. One summer day in the 12th century, villagers in the English town of Woolpit stumbled upon a sight that would etch their home into legend. Two children, a boy and a girl, emerged from a nearby wolf pit, their skin tinged a haunting shade of green, their clothes woven from an unknown material, and their speech utterly unintelligible. Terrified and bewildered, the villagers took them in, only to discover their behavior was just as alien as their appearance. They refused all food until someone offered them raw beans, which they devoured with frantic desperation. Slowly, as the girl learned English, she revealed fragments of their origin, a place called St. Martin's Land, where the sun never shone and everything was bathed in perpetual twilight. Medieval chroniclers treated the account as fact, recording it with eerie matter-of-factness, but modern scholars have wrestled with explanations as strange as the tale itself. Could the green hue point to severe malnutrition, a condition like chlorosis, where iron deficiency tints the skin a sickly green? Or were they victims of arsenic poisoning, a byproduct of copper mining, which might explain their aversion to normal food? Others propose they were Flemish orphans displaced by political violence, their green skin a metaphor for their foreignness or the pallor of starvation. Then there's the wilder theory that the children weren't of this world at all. Their description of a sunless homeland has fueled speculation about underground civilizations or even extraterrestrial origins. Could St. Martin's Land have been a mistranslation of something far more otherworldly? The girls claim that their home lay beyond a great river of light only deepens the mystery, echoing modern accounts of UFO encounters. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Green Children isn't the what or the how, it's the why. Why did this story persist when so many medieval oddities faded away? It taps into something primal, the fear of the unknown, the allure of outsiders, the boundary between our world and whatever lies beyond. The girl eventually assimilated, losing her green tint and marrying a local man. But the boy, frail and withdrawn, died within years. Their brief, haunting presence left Woolpit forever changed, a reminder that history's strangest tales aren't just about facts. They're about the shadows at the edge of our understanding, the stories we tell to make sense of a world far weirder than we dare admit. In the autumn of 1938, the quiet port city of Halifax, England, became the epicenter of a terror so infectious it spread faster than any blade could cut. It began with a single report. A young woman claimed she'd been attacked by a shadowy figure wielding a knife, his face obscured by the night. Within days, similar accounts flooded the streets. A factory worker swore a man had slashed his back. A mother screamed about a gloved hand reaching for her child. The phantom became known as the Halifax Slasher, and soon hundreds believed they were his victims. Yet not a single wound, not a shred of physical evidence was ever found. The hysteria was whipped into frenzy by the local press. Newspapers printed breathless headlines detailing each alleged attack with lurid detail, turning whispers into deafening panic. Police were swamped with calls, their logs filled with descriptions of the slasher, tall, cloaked, vanishing like smoke. Vigilante groups prowled the streets, armed with makeshift weapons, convinced the killer walked among them. But with every passing day, the stories grew wilder, more inconsistent. One man reported being slashed by a stranger on a bicycle. Another claimed the attacker had springs on his shoes, leaping away like a grotesque jack-in-the-box. Psychologists now recognize the Halifax Slasher as a textbook case of mass psychogenic illness, a shared delusion amplified by stress and suggestion. The Great Depression had left England economically battered, and Halifax, with its crowded factories and grinding poverty, was a tinderbox of anxiety. The slasher became a vessel for collective fear, a monstrous scapegoat for the era's unspoken dread. Even the police, initially skeptical, found themselves swept up in the mania until a sharp-eyed officer noticed a pattern. The victims weren't just unharmed, many couldn't even recall the moment of attack. Some had simply stumbled in the dark, their minds filling in the gaps with the slasher's myth. The final blow came when police staged a public demonstration, revealing how easily a person could mistake a stumble for an assault. the press, embarrassed, shifted tone overnight. The slasher was declared a fiction, a shared nightmare, yet the scars lingered. Families who'd barricaded their doors now avoided neighbors they'd accused. Men who'd brandished knives in self-defense slunk back into silence. The Halifax slasher left no physical wounds, but it exposed something far more unsettling: how quickly fear can rewrite reality, turning shadows into monsters and ordinary streets into hunting grounds for the things we dare not name. On a clear spring day in 1876, the residents of Bath County, Kentucky, witnessed something so bizarre it still defies explanation. While working in her yard, a woman named Mrs. Crouch looked up to see what she thought was flakes of snow drifting down from the cloudless sky until the chunks hit the ground with fleshy thuds. These weren't snowflakes. They were pieces of meat. Witnesses described the falling scraps as reddish, uneven slabs, some as large as a man's palm, scattering across fences, roofs, and open fields. One brave soul tasted it, later telling reporters it resembled mutton or venison, gamey and slightly spoiled. Others recoiled in disgust as the meat kept coming, not in a brief flurry but a sustained, grotesque drizzle lasting nearly an hour. Theories erupted faster than the shower itself. Some speculated it was starred jelly, a folkloric substance said to fall from the heavens during meteor showers. Others pointed skyward, blaming flocks of migrating vultures. Could they have regurgitated their meals mid-flight? But vultures rarely fly high enough to rain debris over such a wide area, and no one reported seeing birds overhead. The most outlandish explanation: atmospheric conditions had somehow congealed airborne particles into organic matter, a spontaneous creation of flesh from nothingness. Scientists, baffled, sent samples to labs where microscopes revealed muscle fibers and cartilage, undeniable proof this was real meat, yet no one could determine its origin. Was it animal, human, something else entirely? The Kentucky meat shower remains one of history's most unsettling meteorological anomalies, a visceral reminder that nature doesn't always play by the rules. What lingers isn't just the mystery, but the sheer wrongness of it. Meat doesn't fall from the sky. It shouldn't. Yet on that day in Kentucky, it did, leaving behind stains that seeped into the soil and questions that still rot in the back of the mind. December 15, 1900. The steamer Hesperus approached the Flannan Isles lighthouse off Scotland's coast, expecting the usual flag raised in greeting. But the flagpole stood bare, no keepers waved from the cliffs, no lantern burned in the tower. When crewmen climbed the steep steps to investigate, they found the door locked from the inside. Inside, the scene was a paradox of order and abandonment. The table was set for a meal untouched. A chair lay toppled as if someone had leapt up in haste. The clocks had stopped, but it was the lighthouse log that sent chills down their spines. The final entries, scrawled in headkeeper James Jucat's steady hand, told of savage winds, of a storm so fierce it shook the century-old stone tower. Then a frantic note from Assistant Thomas Marshall: "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." And then nothing. Theories erupted like the very waves that battered Eilean Moor. Some pointed to the freak waves, known to surge without warning in those waters, walls of ocean that could pluck men from the cliffs like toys. Others whispered of foul play. Rival keepers, smugglers silencing witnesses, but no bodies washed ashore. No boats were missing. Then came the more sinister whispers. The Isles were steeped in Celtic lore, home to tales of the Phantom of the Seven Hunters, a spectral force said to claim souls. Locals spoke of an unearthly wail heard that December night, a sound like no natural storm. Modern investigations leaned toward the ocean's fury. The West Landing's iron railings were twisted like wire, ropes shredded, a storage hut demolished, all hallmarks of a rogue wave's brute force. Yet the locked door gnaws at the edges of logic. If the men were swept to sea, how did it relatch behind them? And why would seasoned keepers who'd weathered countless gales abandon the safety of the lighthouse in the first place? The truth may lie in the diary's most haunting line. Days before vanishing, Jukat wrote of an indescribable oppression settling over the island, not fear of the sea but of something else. Something watching. Today, the lighthouse still stands, its beam cutting through the same mist that swallowed 3 men without a trace. Their story endures as a maritime ghost story, a cautionary tale scribbled in salt and whispers, that sometimes the deepest mysteries don't lurk in the storm but in the silence that follows. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, a fireball brighter than the sun streaked across the Siberian sky, swelling into a monstrous column of flame before detonating with the force of 1,000 Hiroshimas. The explosion, centered near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River, unleashed a shockwave so powerful it flattened 80 million trees across 800 square miles, snapping trunks like matchsticks in a perfect radial pattern. Reindeer herds were vaporized, nomadic tents were blown miles into the air. Hundreds of miles away, people were knocked off their feet by the blast, their skin blistering from the heat. Yet when scientists finally reached the remote site 19 years later, they found no crater, no meteorite fragments, just a wasteland of charred, toppled timber pointing outward from ground zero like the spokes of some infernal wheel. Theories spiraled from the start. Was it a comet disintegrating in a volatile burst of icy gases before impact, or a stony asteroid exploding 5 miles up, its debris scattered across the taiga? Some dared to suggest darker possibilities: antimatter annihilating on contact with Earth's atmosphere, or even a stray black hole piercing the planet like a bullet through tissue. Soviet expeditions in the 1920s and 30s uncovered bizarre clues. Trees stripped of branches yet still standing at the epicenter, as if blasted by a focused beam from above. Soil samples revealed microscopic metallic spheres, hinting at extraterrestrial origins, but nothing conclusive. Then there are the lingering oddities. Nights before the explosion, skies across Europe glowed unnaturally, so bright that midnight newspapers could be read outdoors, an effect later linked to dust ejected into the stratosphere. Indigenous Evenki tribes spoke of the god Ogdi, who'd rent the sky with fire as punishment. Stranger still, some trees at ground zero showed signs of rapid, inexplicable regrowth, their rings warped like time itself had twisted around the event. Modern simulations point to an airburst, a cosmic body exploding before impact, yet the sheer scale defies even that explanation. Tunguska's energy release rivals history's largest nuclear tests, but with none of the radiation. It remains a warning etched into the landscape that our planet orbits in a cosmic shooting gallery, and sometimes the universe reminds us just how fragile we are. The next time such an object comes, because it will, we may not be lucky enough for it to land in an uninhabited wilderness. Tunguska isn't just a mystery. It's a dress rehearsal, and we still don't know our lines. In February 1959, 9 experienced hikers trekked into the snowy expanse of Russia's Ural Mountains. They were students and athletes led by Igor Dyatlov, a skilled mountaineer who'd planned a routine expedition. But when they failed to check in, rescuers set out only to uncover a scene so horrifying, so inexplicable, it would haunt the world for decades. Their tent was found ripped open from the inside as if they'd fled in terror. Footprints led away into the snow, some barefoot, others clad only in socks. And then the bodies. One man's skull was crushed, a woman's tongue was missing. Others showed signs of massive internal trauma, broken ribs, fractured skulls with no external wounds. Some wore clothing eerily contaminated with radiation. The official verdict: a compelling natural force. Case closed, but the details refused to stay buried. Theories range from the plausible to the paranormal. Some experts point to an avalanche, a slab avalanche, rare but deadly, that could explain the blunt force injuries. Yet the tent, though half buried, was still standing. The hikers had fled downhill, not away from sliding snow, Others suggest katabatic winds, sudden gusts so powerful they mimic explosions. But why would seasoned hikers abandon shelter for freezing darkness? Then there are the darker whispers, secret military tests in the area that night, perhaps experimental weapons or sonic devices. Soviet documents later revealed parachute mines being tested nearby. Could infrasound have induced panic, driving them to madness? But it's the radiation that lingers like a ghost. Some clothing showed traces, sparking Cold War-era fears of nuclear involvement. Yet no other signs, no burn marks, no blast zone fit that puzzle. Even stranger, reports of orange spheres in the sky that night, documented by other hikers, fuel theories of UFOs or plasma phenomena like ball lightning. The Dyatlov Pass incident isn't just a mystery. It's a mirror reflecting our deepest fears of the wilderness, of governments, of forces beyond our understanding. And in the end, perhaps the truth isn't one answer, but a terrifying collision of many. Nature's fury, human error, and the unnerving possibility that sometimes the unknown doesn't just kill. It erases itself. It started as an ordinary night at Ohio State University's Big Ear radio telescope until August 15, 1977, when a volunteer named Jerry Amon circled a string of numbers on a printout and scribbled a single word next to it: wow. The signal he just witnessed wasn't just unusual. It was unprecedented, a narrowband radio burst blazing at 50 times the noise of deep space, pulsing at precisely the frequency hydrogen resonates across the universe. For 72 electrifying seconds, it held steady, then vanished without a trace, like a cosmic hand flipping a switch. The wow signal wasn't static or interference. It hit with the hallmarks of artificial origin, a focused transmission on a wavelength no natural phenomenon could replicate, and its intensity off the charts. The telescope's system measured it as 6 equaling U, a code so rare Amon had never seen it before. But here's what really stumped scientists. The signal came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, where no known stars or planets could have produced it. Worse yet, despite 40 years of relentless searching, it's never repeated. Theories swing wildly between the mundane and the extraordinary. Some argue it was a reflected signal from Earth, a satellite or secret military test bouncing off space debris. But the Big Ear's design made that nearly impossible. Its twin horns would have detected any terrestrial bounce. Others point to comets, but none were in the area that night. Then there's the spine-tingling possibility. An extraterrestrial beacon momentarily aimed our way before drifting out of alignment. SETI researchers call this the streetlight effect, like searching for lost keys under a lamp because the light's better there. Maybe we just caught a flicker of something vast and unknowable. What lingers isn't just the mystery, but the tantalizing what if. The wow signal lasted barely over a minute, but it rewrote our understanding of cosmic solitude. For those 72 seconds, the universe felt less empty, more alive with possibility. And then silence, a reminder that while space may be teeming with voices, we're still learning how to listen. Deep in the vaults of Yale University's Voynich Library lies a book that has defied understanding for over 6 centuries. The Voynich Manuscript, a relic from the early 15th century, is a puzzle wrapped in vellum, its pages crammed with looping, alien script and illustrations so bizarre they seem plucked from a fever dream. Botanists pore over drawings of plants that don't exist, roots like tentacles, leaves with human faces. Astronomers stare at circular charts of unknown constellations, their patterns unrecognizable in any earthly sky. And then there are the women, dozens of them, nude and oddly proportioned, bathing in emerald green pools connected by twisting tubes and valves, as if part of some alchemical plumbing system. The text is the real enigma, written in a script unlike anything else in history. Its characters flow in a rhythmic, almost musical cadence, yet resist every attempt at translation. Some letters resemble Latin or medieval shorthand, but their combinations form no known language. Cryptographers from both world wars, men who cracked enemy codes, threw themselves at the manuscript and emerged empty-handed. Even the NSA's supercomputers, trained on centuries of linguistic data, have failed to find a pattern. The closest anyone came was in 2019, when a researcher claimed to spot hints of ancient Hebrew hidden in the symbols, but the theory collapsed under scrutiny. Is it a hoax? The parchment's carbon dating confirms its age, and the ink's chemical composition matches 15th century recipes. But the most compelling evidence against fraud is the manuscript's internal consistency. Statistical analysis reveals the text follows Zipf's law, a linguistic principle seen in all human languages where certain words recur predictably. This suggests the writing isn't random gibberish but a structured, intentional language. So why can't we read it? Theories swing from the scholarly to the sensational. Some argue it's a lost Proto-Romance dialect encrypted to protect herbal secrets or heretical knowledge. Others propose it's glossolalia, the speech of angels, transcribed by a mystic in a trance. Then there's the extraterrestrial angle, that the manuscript isn't from our world at all. But perhaps the most haunting possibility is that we're staring at a language that died with its last speaker, a cultural echo that left no dictionary behind. What makes the Voynich manuscript endure isn't just its mystery, but its defiance. In an age where algorithms decode ancient texts in hours, this book remains stubbornly silent. It mocks our certainty, whispering that some doors in history are still locked and the keys might be lost forever. Every generation brings new tools, new minds, yet the manuscript's secrets cling like shadows. Maybe that's the point. Some puzzles aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to remind us how much we don't know. At the bottom of the Aegean Sea, encrusted in the remains of a 2,000-year-old shipwreck, divers in 1900 and one pulled up a lump of corroded bronze that would rewrite history. The Antikythera mechanism, named for the island near its discovery, looked like nothing more than a broken artifact at first glance until scientists realized the truth. Beneath the layers of time and saltwater oxidation lay an intricate assembly of gears, dials, and inscriptions so advanced it shouldn't have existed for another 1,000 years. This wasn't just a relic, it was a masterpiece of engineering, a celestial calculator capable of predicting eclipses, tracking the cycles of the Olympics, and modeling the erratic movements of the moon with pinpoint accuracy. X-ray imaging revealed more than 30 interlocking bronze gears, some with teeth cut to precise, mathematically significant angles. The front face bore a cosmic display, a miniature universe where pointers marked the positions of the sun, moon, and 5 known planets, all moving in perfect sync. The back housed spiral dials predicting lunar and solar eclipses years in advance, tied to the cycles of Babylonian astronomy. How did such sophistication vanish from history? The mechanism's knowledge rooted in the work of ancient Greek astronomers like Hipparchus seems to have died with its creators. Some scholars believe the Roman conquest of Greece scattered these secrets, while others point to the burning of the Library of Alexandria, where similar devices may have been catalogued and lost. What's certain is that nothing like it appears again until the mechanical clocks of medieval Europe, a millennium later. Modern reconstructions have only deepened the mystery. Teams using advanced imaging and precision machining have built working replicas, revealing the mechanism's mind-bending complexity. One gear, for instance, uses a pin and slot system to mimic the moon's elliptical orbit, a concept formalized by Kepler in the 17th century. Another acts as a differential gear, a component thought to have been invented in the 19th century for automobiles. But the most haunting question isn't how it worked, it's who used it. Was this a philosopher's toy, a navigator's tool, or something darker? Ancient texts hint at devices like this being used to awe the masses, their celestial predictions wielded as divine proof by priests and kings. The Antikythera mechanism forces us to confront a chilling possibility. That genius doesn't always accumulate over time. Sometimes it flares like a match, brilliant, brief, and swallowed by the dark. In October 1943, the USS Eldridge, a Navy destroyer escort docked in Philadelphia, became the center of a rumor so bizarre, it blurred the line between military secrecy and science fiction. According to legend, the ship was part of a top-secret experiment to render it invisible not just to radar, but to the naked eye. Witnesses claimed that as powerful electromagnetic fields pulsed around the vessel, a thick green fog enveloped it, and in an instant, the entire ship vanished from the Philadelphia Naval Yard. Some swore they saw it reappear moments later in Norfolk, Virginia, over 200 miles away, before blinking back to its original location. But the most horrifying details came from the crew. Sailors allegedly stumbled off the ship with severe burns, some driven mad, others reportedly fused into the metal bulkheads. Their limbs and torsos merged with the ship's structure as if matter itself had momentarily lost its rules. The Navy has repeatedly denied the experiment ever took place, dismissing it as a hoax fueled by garbled accounts of routine degaussing, a process used to shield ships from magnetic mines. Yet declassified documents from the era confirm the military was deeply invested in invisibility research, including projects exploring radar deflection and even optical camouflage. More tantalizing are the persistent claims linking the experiment to Albert Einstein's unfinished unified field theory, an attempt to merge electromagnetism and gravity into a single framework. While no evidence ties Einstein directly to the Eldridge, his wartime work for the Navy and his sudden, unexplained resignation in 1943 have fueled speculation that his theories were weaponized with catastrophic consequences. Then there are the testimonies that refuse to fade. Carlos Allende, a self-proclaimed witness, wrote rambling letters in the 1950s describing sailors stuck in the deck like figures in a wax museum. Another account from a supposed crew member named Al Bielek claimed he'd experienced time displacement, waking up in 1983 with memories of a future that hadn't happened yet. Even skeptics admit the story's endurance is peculiar. Why would a simple myth spawn decades of lawsuits, congressional inquiries, and even a 1984 movie starring Gene Hackman? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between paranoia and lost history. The Philadelphia experiment taps into our deepest anxieties about science unchecked. What happens when curiosity outpaces caution? It's a story about the cost of secrets, the fragility of human bodies in the face of unfathomable forces, and the eerie possibility that some experiments don't just fail. They vanish just like the Eldridge. In the sweltering June heat of 1947, a British merchant ship near the Strait of Malacca picked up a frantic distress call that would become the stuff of maritime nightmare. The voice crackled through the radio, barely coherent. All officers, including the captain, are dead, lying in chartroom and bridge, possibly whole crew dead. Then, after a pause, a chilling final whisper, "I die." When rescuers reached the SS Aurang Medan, they found a scene ripped straight from a horror film. The entire crew sprawled across the deck, their faces locked in grotesque expressions of pure terror, eyes wide, mouths agape as if frozen mid-scream. Even the ship's dog lay stiff, teeth bared in a snarl, yet no wounds marked the bodies, no signs of fire, struggle, or chemical residue, just an eerie, suffocating silence and a creeping cold that clung to the ship despite the tropical sun. Theories spiral from the plausible to the paranormal. Some point to carbon monoxide poisoning, suggesting a faulty boiler might have leaked odorless gas, inducing hallucinations of terror before suffocation. Others argue for hydrogen sulfide, a toxic byproduct of rotting cargo that can paralyze victims mid-breath. But skeptics note these gases rarely kill so uniformly, leaving twisted limbs and vomit, neither of which were present. Then there's the more sinister angle, illegal munitions transport. Declassified documents reveal the Dutch-owned Aurang Medan was operating in post-war Indonesia, a hotbed of black market arms trade. Could volatile chemicals like nerve agents have leaked, causing instant silent death? But the story takes a stranger turn. When the rescue team tried to tow the ship to port, smoke suddenly billowed from below deck. They barely had time to cut the lines before the Orang Medan exploded, sinking so fast no wreckage was ever recovered. No cargo manifest surfaced. Even the ship's registration defied verification, leading some historians to question if it existed at all. Could this have been an elaborate hoax, a wartime ghost story spun from miscommunication and rumor? Yet the survivors' testimonies persist, etched with unsettling details. Rescuers swore the cold wasn't just absence of heat. It felt alive, clinging to their skin like something watching, and the crew's faces, not peaceful, not pained, but horrified, as if they'd seen something beyond comprehension in their final moments. The ocean has swallowed countless ships, but few leave behind a mystery this visceral. The Orang Medan isn't just a ghost ship. It's a riddle wrapped in a warning that sometimes the dead don't just vanish. They take the truth with them. On a quiet morning in August 1966, two electricians working near Rio de Janeiro's Niterói Bridge stumbled upon a sight straight out of a surrealist nightmare. Two men in business suits lay side by side on a grassy hill, their faces obscured by strange, molded lead masks. At first glance, they might have looked like sunbathers shielding their eyes until the witnesses noticed the eerie stillness. The men weren't sleeping, they were dead. The police found no signs of violence, no struggle, not even a trace of poison in their systems, but the scene was far from ordinary. Each man carried a cryptic note, one reading 16:30 hours to be ready, and the other 4:30 protection mask. Their clothes were meticulously pressed, their pockets stuffed with cash and a receipt for the purchase of the very lead masks they wore. Strangest of all, their eyes were wide open behind those grotesque metal visors, as if frozen in the moment of witnessing something unimaginable. As investigators dug deeper, the case spiraled into the realm of the occult. The men, later identified as Manuel Pereira da Cruz and Miguel José Viana, were known to be obsessed with the paranormal. Friends revealed they'd been part of a secretive group called the Order of the Seven Rays, a UFO-worshipping cult that believed extraterrestrials would one day descend to initiate chosen humans. The lead masks, they speculated, weren't just shields, they were ritual objects, designed to filter harmful cosmic rays or perhaps even allow the wearers to see beyond this dimension. Then came the most unsettling clue. Days before their deaths, the pair had told family they were traveling to receive a gift and would become immortal. They'd packed lunch, dressed formally, and hiked to that isolated hill, almost like they were keeping an appointment, with whom or what no one knows. Some theories point to a botched experiment, lead shields radiation, and Brazil's burgeoning nuclear program had stirred both fascination and fear. Others whisper of government surveillance, noting that the area was near military installations. But the truth may lie in the shadows of Cold War paranoia. 1966 Brazil was a cauldron of political unrest and UFO mania, where science and superstition collided. The men's notes suggest a countdown, a precise moment when something was supposed to happen. Did they believe they'd ascend to a UFO? Were they awaiting a signal that never came? The lead masks, heavy and cold, now sit in police storage, silent witnesses to a riddle that refuses to dissolve. In the end, the case isn't just about two deaths. It's about what happens when belief outpaces reality and how far humans will go to touch the unknown, even if it costs them everything. Just past midnight on February 25, 1942, air raid sirens wailed across Los Angeles, jolting a city already on edge. Pearl Harbor was fresh in memory, and now blackouts in effect, searchlights carving the sky, anti-aircraft guns erupted, pumping over 1,400 shells into the darkness. But what were they shooting at? The official explanation: a stray weather balloon misidentified in the wartime panic. The thousands of eyewitnesses who stared upward that night swore it was something far stranger. Reporters on rooftops described a massive, slow-moving object, glowing amber, hovering silently as shrapnel burst around it. The Los Angeles Times ran a front-page photo of searchlight beams converging on what looked like a sleek, angular craft, dwarfing any known aircraft. Police officers, firefighters, and even Navy personnel gave sworn statements about a huge, luminous formation drifting untouched through the barrage. One artillery officer later confessed, "We hit it directly, repeatedly. It didn't fall. It didn't even change course. Military reports shifted like sand in the wind." First Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox dismissed the event as a false alarm. Then, within hours, General George Marshall privately briefed President Roosevelt, suggesting the possibility of unidentified airplanes of unknown origin. Decades later, declassified documents revealed even more confusion. Radar operators had tracked an object moving erratically, at speeds no balloon could achieve. Theories ricochet from Japanese prototypes, though no such aircraft matched the descriptions to experimental drones, but the most haunting accounts came from civilians. Some described the object splitting into smaller lights, darting with impossible agility before reuniting. Others swore it vanished mid-air, leaving only smoke and questions. The Battle of Los Angeles became a Rosetta Stone for UFO lore, a moment when official denial collided with collective witness. Was it wartime hysteria? A secret test gone awry, or something beyond the era's comprehension? The shells fell, the light swept, and the truth, whatever it was, slipped through the cracks like fog through fingers. One thing's certain, that night Los Angeles didn't just fight an enemy, it fought the unknown. High above the remote Norwegian valley of Hessdalen, strange lights have danced for decades, glowing orbs that pulse, split, and dart with eerie intelligence. Since the early 1980s, farmers, scientists, and baffled witnesses have watched these luminous phenomena hover for hours, vanish in seconds, or streak across the sky at speeds no aircraft could match. Some glow like burning magnesium, white-hot and piercing. Others shimmer gold or blood red, floating just above the tree line like lost lanterns. But the most unsettling part: these aren't fleeting flashes. They're persistent, predictable, and utterly indifferent to the humans staring up at them. Local folklore whispers that the lights are spirits, lost souls of miners who perished in the valley's rugged hills centuries ago. One legend tells of a heartbroken smith who crafted a lantern to search for his missing wife, only to vanish himself, his eternal light still wandering the slopes. But science has its own ghost stories. Researchers from Ostfold University set up the Hessdalen Automatic Measurement Station in 1983, capturing footage of orbs moving against the wind, emitting radio waves, even splitting into smaller lights that spiral like galaxies. The most compelling theory: plasma superheated gas ionized by the valley's unique geology. Hessdalen sits atop mineral-rich bedrock, riddled with copper and zinc, with underground rivers that could generate massive electrical charges. When these charges interact with the atmosphere, they might create glowing balls of plasma, much like miniature versions of the sun's surface. Yet even this explanation fractures under scrutiny. Natural plasma typically lasts milliseconds. The Hessdalen lights linger for hours, sometimes changing direction mid-flight, as if guided by invisible hands. In 2010, an Italian team recorded an orb emitting a laser-like beam straight into the ground, a phenomenon no known natural process can replicate. And then there's the eerie silence. Witnesses consistently report the lights move without sound, hovering with an almost mechanical precision. What haunts Hessdalen isn't just the lights themselves, but the void of understanding they reveal. Here, in this snow-brushed valley, the line between folklore and physics blurs. Are they electrical anomalies, lost souls, or something else, something watching us back, just as curious as we are? The lights don't answer, they only glow, indifferent to our theories, our fear, our wonder. And perhaps that's the most unsettling truth of all: some mysteries refuse to be solved. They simply exist, burning silently in the dark, waiting for us to catch up. On a sunny afternoon in 1964, firefighter Jim Templeton snapped what should have been a simple family photo. His 5-year-old daughter Elizabeth playing near England's Solway Firth, the rolling hills and clear skies framing her like a postcard. But when the film was developed, the image revealed something impossible. Standing directly behind Elizabeth was a towering figure clad in what appeared to be a sleek, white spacesuit, its helmet reflecting the sunlight with an otherworldly gleam. The strangest part, Templeton insisted no one else had been there that day. Experts initially dismissed the Solway Firth spaceman as a classic case of double exposure or a flaw in the developing process. Yet the photo defied easy explanation. Kodak technicians analyzed the original negative, confirming it hadn't been tampered with. The figure wasn't a smudge or light leak, it had depth, dimension, and cast no shadow, as if superimposed by some invisible hand. Skeptics proposed it might be Templeton's wife, her silhouette blurred as she turned away, but the proportions were all wrong. The figure loomed over Elizabeth, its limbs elongated, its posture eerily still. Then came the wilder theories. Some suggested a time traveler caught mid-apparition, his suit designed for an environment not yet invented. Others whispered of interdimensional beings slipping into our world for reasons beyond comprehension. The photo's timing fueled speculation. 1964 was the height of the space race, and NASA's early spacesuit prototypes bore a striking resemblance to the Solway figure. Could this have been a classified test gone wrong, or a cosmic visitor drawn to the innocence of a child? But the most haunting twist emerged decades later. Templeton claimed that shortly after the photo was taken, 2 men in dark suits who never identified themselves approached him, demanding the negatives and questioning him aggressively about what he'd seen. When he asked how they even knew about the photo, they simply replied, "You'd be surprised what we know." Whether these were government agents, pranksters, or figments of a mind unsettled by the inexplicable, no one can say. The Solway Firth spaceman remains a Rorschach test for belief. To some, it's a technical glitch, a trick of light and film chemistry. To others, it's proof that reality has cracks and sometimes things slip through. But perhaps the most unsettling possibility is this, that the truth isn't hidden in the photo at all, but in the empty space just beyond the frame, where the figure was supposedly never standing yet somehow, impossibly, always was. On a frigid February morning in 1855, the residents of Devon, England, woke to find their quiet countryside transformed into something straight out of a nightmare. Overnight, a trail of hoof prints, each shaped like a cloven foot, had appeared in the snow, stretching over 100 miles in a near-perfect straight line. These weren't the scattered tracks of a wandering animal. They marched relentlessly across fields, over rooftops, even scaling walls and vanishing on the other side, as if whatever made them could walk through solid barriers. Panic spread like wildfire. Local newspapers declared it the work of the devil himself, sent to punish the sinful. Witnesses spoke of hearing eerie, high-pitched shrieks in the night, though no one saw the creature responsible. The prints themselves defied logic, each measured exactly 4 inches long, 3 inches wide, and spaced precisely 8 inches apart, as if stamped by a mechanical press rather than a living being. Farmers bolted their doors, vicars gave impromptu sermons on repentance, and skeptics, well, even they struggled to explain how a single entity could traverse such an impossible distance in just a few hours, leaving no other trace behind. Theories collided in the aftermath. Some suggested a rogue kangaroo had escaped from a private menagerie, its bounding gait leaving odd imprints. Others pointed to experimental hot air balloons, their trailing ropes fitted with pointed ends that punched the snow as they drifted. But neither explanation accounted for the print's supernatural precision or their appearance on rooftops and inside walled gardens. More outlandish ideas emerged: a giant leaping bird, a renegade badger with deformed paws, even an early misstep by some as yet unknown extraterrestrial visitor. Then there were the darker whispers. Devon's folklore is steeped in tales of phantom black dogs and demonic omens. Could this have been a collective hallucination, a shared delusion born from rural superstition? Modern researchers have floated the possibility of atmospheric phenomena, rare weather conditions that might have sculpted the snow into eerie, uniform shapes. Yet even this feels unsatisfying. The sheer scale of the event, its meticulous geometry, and the terror it inspired linger in the historical record like a stain. What chills isn't just the mystery, but the reaction. The devil's footprints exposed how quickly rationality buckles under the weight of the inexplicable. In an age before viral headlines, this single night became a national obsession, a reminder that even in the industrial era, the unknown could still claw its way into the daylight. And perhaps that's the real lesson, not that the devil walked through Devon, but that we'll always invent him when the world refuses to make sense. For decades, drivers and pedestrians in cities from Philadelphia to Buenos Aires have stumbled upon strange, cryptic messages embedded in the asphalt beneath their feet, mysterious tiles, each bearing the same haunting phrase, Toynbee idea. In movie 2001, Resurrect Dead on Planet Jupiter, these so-called Toynbee tiles first appeared in the early 1980s, their bold, block-lettered warnings pressed into the pavement with an almost obsessive precision. Some are as small as a license plate, others stretch several feet long, their tar-covered edges fused to the street as if they'd grown there. But the real mystery isn't their existence, it's the mind behind them. Decoding the tiles has become a global obsession. The phrase references two seemingly unrelated ideas. Arnold Toynbee, a British historian who speculated about humanity's spiritual evolution, and Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey, where the monoliths guide humankind toward a celestial rebirth. Resurrect Dead on Planet Jupiter suggests a bizarre cosmic resurrection plan, but whose vision was this? Early researchers traced the tiles' creation to a Philadelphia man named James Morasco, a reclusive eccentric who believed Kubrick's film held secret instructions for colonizing Jupiter with the reanimated dead. Morasco allegedly mixed linoleum and roofing tar to craft the tiles, embedding them under cover of darkness, a one-man propaganda campaign for his interstellar salvation theory. Yet inconsistencies linger. Some tiles reference media corporations and political conspiracies, accusing networks like CNN of suppressing the Jupiter resurrection truth. Others appeared years after Morasco's death in 2003, suggesting copycats or that the original tiler had accomplices, the most chilling twist. A subset of tiles, dubbed renegades, contain ominous messages like "murder every journalist" in jagged, uneven script, as if the creator's ideology had curdled into rage. Urban explorers have spent years mapping the tiles, but their true purpose remains elusive. Are they art, a manifesto, the ramblings of a lone visionary? The tiles' resilience adds to their mystique. Decades of traffic haven't erased them. And when roads are repaved, new ones often appear nearby, as if the idea itself refuses to die. In a world where secrets rarely stay buried, the Toynbee tiles endure, pressing their cryptic plea into the skin of the city, waiting for someone or something to listen. On November 22, 1987, television screens across Chicago flickered with something that wasn't supposed to be there. During a broadcast of the popular sci-fi series Doctor Who, the signal was abruptly hijacked, replaced by a figure in a distorted, rubbery mask, his face frozen in a grotesque grin. This was Max Headroom, a character already familiar to audiences as a glitchy, AI-generated TV host, but this wasn't a planned segment, this was an intrusion. For nearly 90 seconds, the figure swayed eerily, his voice warped by a modulator, spouting disjointed phrases like "your love is fading" and "catch the wave." Behind him, a person in a dress spun a fly swatter like a deranged orchestra conductor, while a television blared static in the background. Then, as suddenly as it began, the broadcast returned to normal, leaving thousands of bewildered viewers wondering if they'd hallucinated the whole thing. The technical audacity of the hack was staggering. Overriding a television signal required precise knowledge of broadcast infrastructure and equipment most civilians couldn't access. The intruder had targeted WTTW, Chicago's PBS affiliate, but investigators later discovered an earlier, failed attempt that same night on WGN, a major network. Whoever was behind this wasn't just skilled, they were brazen. Yet despite a full FCC investigation and even FBI involvement, no arrests were ever made. The culprit vanished into the analog static of the 80s, leaving behind only theories. Was it a rogue engineer, a prankster with insider knowledge? Or something darker, a dry run for a more sinister disruption? The audio deepened the mystery. Beneath the distortion, hidden messages were allegedly buried, backward masking numerical codes, even references to cult films like The Clutch of Ambrosius. Conspiracy theorists seized on these fragments, linking them to everything from CIA mind control experiments to early viral marketing for a Max Headroom revival that never materialized. But the most haunting detail, the intrusion's timing. It occurred during an episode of Doctor Who titled Horror of Fang Rock, a story about an alien disguising itself among humans. The coincidence felt less like chance and more like a wink from the hacker, a meta joke about invasion and identity. Decades later, the Max Headroom intrusion remains a cultural touchstone, inspiring documentaries, art, and even music samples. Its legacy isn't just in the unsolved crime, but in the unsettling questions it raises about control. In an era before firewalls and encryption, one person proved how fragile our media landscape really was, how easily a signal could be stolen, twisted, and weaponized as performance art. The hacker didn't just hijack a broadcast, they exposed the thin line between entertainment and chaos, leaving behind a grinning, pixelated ghost to remind us the airwaves were never truly safe. And in the age of deepfakes and cyberwarfare, that ghost still haunts us. The summer of 1994 brought a storm unlike any other to Oakville, Washington, but not the kind anyone expected. Instead of rain, thick, gelatinous blobs began plummeting from the sky, clinging to rooftops, trees, and even the stunned residents below. At first, locals mistook the substance for hail until they touched it. The blobs weren't frozen, they were soft, translucent, and disturbingly alive. Eyewitnesses described the blobs quivering on contact, as if pulsating with some unseen energy. Dottie Hearn, a nurse who was splattered while walking her dog, collapsed hours later with severe flu-like symptoms, violent nausea, dizziness, and a burning sensation in her lungs. Others reported similar illnesses, their bodies reacting as if attacked by an invisible invader. Panic set in. Was this some kind of biological weapon? A government experiment gone wrong. Scientists scrambled to analyze samples, and the results only deepened the mystery. The blobs contained human white blood cells, specifically macrophages, the body's frontline defenders against infection. But how could human cells rain from the sky? Some researchers proposed a bizarre but plausible explanation. The blobs were bacterial colonies, possibly from a ruptured high-altitude research balloon. Certain strains of bacteria, like Pseudomonas aeruginosa, can form slimy biofilms resembling the Oakville substance, yet no known bacteria match the exact genetic markers found in the blobs. Then came the darker theories. Oakville sat near military flight paths, and whispers spread about clandestine tests involving airborne medical waste or even engineered pathogens. Conspiracy theorists pointed to declassified Cold War documents detailing experiments with aerosolized biological agents. Could this have been an accidental release? Skeptics countered with natural phenomena, perhaps jellyfish fragments carried inland by freak weather, though jellyfish don't explain the human cells or the sudden illnesses. The most chilling twist, the blobs kept coming. Over several weeks, multiple showers drenched the area, each batch slightly different in texture and toxicity. One sample, sent to an independent lab in Seattle, contained traces of Enterobacter cloacae, a gut bacterium linked to severe infections. Another showed signs of ethylene glycol, a toxic compound found in antifreeze. The evidence seemed to point in circles, never conclusive, always unnerving. To this day, the Oakville blobs defy categorization. Were they a scientific anomaly, a military mishap, or something far stranger? The town's residents never got closure, just a lingering sense of vulnerability, a reminder that the sky, which should bring rain and sunlight, can sometimes deliver nightmares instead. And perhaps that's the most unsettling truth of all. Some mysteries don't just fade away, they stick to you like those blobs, impossible to scrub off completely. Los Angeles, 1947, a city glittering with post-war optimism, where dreams were manufactured as fast as the celluloid that captured them. But on January 15th, in a vacant lot near Lamont Park, that illusion shattered. A young woman's body was found severed cleanly at the waist, drained of blood, her face slashed into a grotesque ear-to-ear grin. The newspapers would christen her the Black Dahlia, a moniker lifted from a forgettable film noir, but the horror of Elizabeth Short's murder was anything but fictional. The details were methodical, almost surgical. Her body had been washed, her intestines meticulously tucked beneath her hips. Deep cuts marred her thighs and breasts, the wounds so precise they hinted at medical training. And then there was the posing, her arms raised overhead, her legs splayed, as if arranged for some macabre audience. The killer had mailed her belongings to the press, along with a taunting note crafted from cut-out newspaper letters. Here it is. Turning in wed, January 29th, that's my birthday, but no surrender came, just silence. Suspects piled up like the tabloids that fed on the case. George Hodel, a prominent physician with alleged ties to surrealist circles, became a favorite decades later when his own son, a retired detective, accused him based on covert recordings where he seemed to confess. Others pointed to a group of wealthy, sadistic doctors who supposedly held parties fueled by morphine and mutilation. The LAPD chased over 1,000 leads, even administering lie detector tests to reporters covering the story, but each thread frayed into nothing. The media frenzy was unprecedented. Photos of the crime scene were leaked, splashed across front pages, turning Short's tragedy into a lurid spectacle. Reporters invented salacious backstories, calling her a temptress, a drifter, when in truth she was just another hopeful in a city built on chewing up and spitting out young women. The coverage didn't just obscure the investigation, it reshaped true crime itself, setting a template where victims became characters and killers became boogeymen. What lingers isn't just the brutality, but the unresolved tension between justice and obsession. The Black Dahlia case birthed armchair detectives, inspired novels, films, and podcasts, yet Short herself faded beneath the myth. Her murder remains a mirror reflecting our hunger for resolution, our complicity in sensationalism, and the uncomfortable truth that some stories don't end. They just echo, whispering from the shadows of a city that never really knew her. Between 1968 and 1969, a faceless terror stalked Northern California, taunting the public with a twisted game of murder and encrypted riddles. The Zodiac Killer didn't just kill, he performed, crafting a spectacle of fear with each cryptic letter sent to newspapers. Typed in bold, almost mocking prose, his messages were signed with a crossed circle symbol, his self-assigned insignia. But it was the ciphers, jumbles of symbols and codes tucked into those letters, that turned his crimes into an unsolvable puzzle, one that still torments cryptographers and armchair detectives today. The first cipher, mailed in July 1969 alongside details of 2 murders, seemed like a straightforward substitution code. It took 2 school teachers cracking it late at night with pencil and paper to reveal Zodiac's gloating manifesto. I like killing people because it is more fun than hunting wild game. Yet the longer 340-character cipher that followed, dubbed the 340 cipher, defied every effort. Decades passed, the FBI enlisted top cryptanalysts. Amateur sleuths formed online armies, all failed. Then, in 2020, a team of codebreakers using advanced software and historical context finally pierced it. The result, not a confession or a name, but a chilling ramble about the afterlife, referencing paradise and slaves in Zodiac's signature misspellings. Even solved, it felt like another taunt. Suspects multiplied like shadows. Arthur Lee Allen, a schoolteacher with a Zodiac brand watch and a history of violence, was grilled by police but never charged. Others pointed to Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, whose manifesto echoed Zodiac's anti-establishment rage. Then there's Gary Francis Post, a recent suspect unearthed by a team of cold case investigators who claim his name hides in one cipher's scrambled letters. Yet without DNA or a smoking gun, every theory crumbles under scrutiny. The terror isn't just in the unsolved murders, it's in the lingering uncertainty. Zodiac's final cipher, the 13-symbol cipher, remains unbroken, a 40-symbol lock with no key. Cryptographers call it uncrackable by modern standards, its symbols too short for pattern analysis. Some believe it holds his identity. Others think it's gibberish, one last joke at the world's expense. What makes Zodiac endure isn't just the brutality, but the duality. A killer who craved attention yet vanished, a cipher that teases resolution but resists it. His letters weren't just threats, they were a performance, a way to etch himself into history, and it worked. Decades later, we're still staring at those symbols, searching for the man who turned murder into a game where the rules were his alone. The truth might still be there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to see what everyone else has missed. In the cold November of 1970, hikers near Norway's Isdalen Valley stumbled upon a scene ripped from a Cold War thriller. A woman's body lay half-covered in petrol-soaked clothing, her face and fingertips scorched beyond recognition. Beside her, a pile of burned passports, each bearing different names but the same haunting face. This was the Isdal woman, a mystery wrapped in layers of deliberate erasure, a real-life enigma that would taunt investigators for decades. The forensic details only deepened the intrigue. Toxicology reports revealed she'd swallowed a lethal dose of sleeping pills before the flames ever touched her. Her stomach held traces of burnt waffles eaten just before death, a strangely mundane final meal. But it was her belongings that painted the portrait of a ghost, the labels cut from her clothes, the matchboxes tucked in her luggage, their serial numbers scratched off. Even the fake registration at a Bergen hotel where she'd signed in as Finella Lork, a name tied to no living person. Every clue was a breadcrumb leading nowhere, meticulously scrubbed of meaning. Authorities reconstructed her face, revealing a woman in her 30s with dark hair and sharp features, but no one came forward to claim her. Fingerprint requests sent to Interpol drew blanks. Then came the spy theories. Norway in 1970 was a nest of espionage, its fjords crawling with agents tracking Soviet submarine activity. The Isdal woman's movements mapped like a covert itinerary, luxury hotels in Geneva, clandestine meetings in Brussels, a trail of aliases spanning Europe. Was she a defector, a courier caught in a game too dangerous to quit? Decrypting her final hours only thickened the fog. Witnesses recalled seeing her with a well-dressed man days before her death, speaking in hushed tones. A bus driver remembered her clutching a suitcase, boarding a route that ended near the valley. But the most chilling detail emerged decades later. Isotope analysis of her teeth traced her childhood to wartime Germany or France with stints in Chile. A life spent in shadows, erased with surgical precision. The Isdal woman's case isn't just unsolved, it's a masterclass in disappearance. Someone went to grotesque lengths to ensure she'd never be identified. And in that absence, she became something far more unsettling, a mirror for our deepest paranoias, a warning that in a world of secrets, some identities aren't just lost. They're unmade. Deep in the Bavarian countryside, just days before Easter in 1922, the Gruber family settled into their remote farmhouse at Hinterkaifeck, where they were already living among something sinister. Neighbors later recalled odd details from the weeks before the murders: fresh footprints leading toward the house but none returning, a set of house keys that vanished and mysteriously reappeared, even the muffled sounds of footsteps in the attic that sent the family's maid fleeing in terror. She wouldn't escape for long. Days later, investigators would find her corpse alongside the rest of the Grubers, their skulls crushed with a mattock, their bodies dragged into the barn like discarded dolls. The crime scene defied logic. The killer or killers had lingered for days after the murders, feeding the cattle, stoking the fire, even eating from the family's pantry. Traces of their presence were everywhere: a half-read newspaper left on the table, disturbed bedding in the attic where someone had clearly slept. Yet no valuables were stolen and no clear motive emerged. The police fixated on one chilling detail: the Gruber's youngest daughter, 7-year-old Kazilia, had been found with her hair meticulously braided post-mortem, as if the murderer had paused to perform some grotesque act of care. Suspects abounded but slipped through investigators' fingers like smoke. Andreas Gruber, the family patriarch, was rumored to be abusive, fueling theories of a revenge killing by a disgruntled farmhand. Others pointed to a local peddler seen nearby or even a disturbed neighbor who later committed suicide. Then there was the eerie journal entry from a man named Lawrence Schlittenbauer, a former suitor of the dead maid, who wrote cryptically about settling debts days before the massacre. Yet evidence never solidified, but it's the paranormal whispers that cling darkest to Hinterkaifeck. Locals swore the farm was cursed long before the murders, that Andreas had heard ghostly knocking at his door years earlier, dismissing it as superstition until the night it became real. Others claimed the property sat atop an ancient burial ground, its soil steeped in restless energy. The truth we'll never know. The farmhouse was razed, the case files lost during World War II, and the land left fallow as if the earth itself refused to remember. What lingers isn't just the brutality, it's the intimacy. Whoever killed the Grubers didn't just invade their home. They made themselves part of it, blurring the line between murderer and ghost until even the shadows seemed complicit. On a crisp December morning in 1948, beachgoers in Adelaide, Australia, stumbled upon a scene that would become one of history's most inscrutable puzzles. A well-dressed man lay lifeless against the seawall at Somerton Beach, his head resting peacefully as if he'd simply dozed off. But this was no ordinary tragic death. It was the opening act of a mystery so layered, so deliberately obscured, that even now, decades later, it still taunts investigators and armchair detectives alike. The man carried no identification, just a suitcase stuffed with clothes bearing removed labels, an unused train ticket, and a tiny scrap of paper torn from the final page of a book, printed with the words Tamam Shud, Persian for ended or finished. The phrase was plucked from the final line of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a collection of poetic verses popular among intellectuals and, chillingly, known to be used as a cipher by Cold War operatives. But the real shock came when a local businessman turned in a rare edition of the Rubaiyat he'd found in his car months earlier. Tucked inside, a coded message scrawled in pencil, its sequence of letters defying every cryptographer who tried to crack it. Forensic details only deepened the intrigue. The man's shoes were polished to a shine, yet sand clung to their soles, suggesting he'd walked along the beach before his death. His spleen was enlarged to nearly 3 times its normal size, and his pupils were pinpoint signs of possible poisoning, though no toxin was ever identified. Then came the whispers of espionage. Australia in 1948 was a hotbed of post-war spy activity, with Soviet and British intelligence vying for influence. Was the Somerton man a discarded asset, silenced before he could defect? The timing was uncanny. Just months before, a Soviet diplomat had defected in Canberra, exposing Soviet spy networks. But the most haunting twist emerged decades later. In 2022, DNA analysis finally identified the man as Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne. Yet this revelation only birthed new questions. Webb had no known ties to intelligence work, but his wife had left him abruptly months before his death, relocating to a town near a top-secret weapons testing site. The code in the Rubaiyat remains unsolved, its meaning lost to time. Was it a personal farewell, a spy's dead drop instruction, or something else entirely, a red herring meant to mislead? The Tamam Shud case lingers like a half-remembered dream, its truth hovering just beyond reach. It's a story about erasure, of identities, of motives, of endings. Because Tamam Shud doesn't just mean finished. In Persian poetry, it's the closing note of a story. But in this case, the story refuses to close. It whispers instead that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to haunt. That signal wasn't just a blip in the static, it was a scream in the silence, a 72-second burst of radio waves so perfectly engineered, so undeniably unnatural, it still burns in the minds of astronomers decades later. The WOW signal wasn't static, wasn't interference, wasn't some cosmic hiccup. It was a needle in the galactic haystack, stitched from the exact frequency hydrogen sings across the universe as if whoever, or whatever, sent it wanted to be found. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it vanished, leaving behind a printout circled in red and a question that refuses to die. Were we being hailed? Modern searches for extraterrestrial life still chase that same cosmic whisper. Projects like Breakthrough Listen, with its billion-dollar arsenal of telescopes, scan the same patch of Sagittarius where the WOW signal originated, hoping for a repeat performance that never comes. SETI researchers have spun theories like spiderwebs. Could it have been a one-time beacon from a dying civilization, a lighthouse flickering once before collapsing into the dark? Or was it something more mundane, a military satellite test declassified decades too late to matter? The irony is crushing. In an age where we're drowning in data, where telescopes track asteroids before they're visible to the naked eye, the most compelling evidence of alien contact remains a cassette tape from 1977, its secrets locked behind analog hiss. Yet the WOW signal's legacy isn't just in the silence that followed. It rewrote the rules of the search. Before WOW, SETI focused on deliberate, repetitive broadcast. After scientists realized the universe might not bother with an encore, today's algorithms hunt for technosignatures, fleeting anomalies, industrial pollution on distant planets, even Dyson spheres harvesting starlight. The signal taught us to look for ghosts, not handshakes, but the most haunting possibility isn't that we missed the message, it's that we didn't miss it at all. What if the signal wasn't meant for us? What if it was a cosmic dial tone, a test pulse from some interstellar network we're not yet plugged into, buzzing past Earth like a radio wave grazing a stone in a river? Or worse, what if it was a reply and we're the ones who never followed up? The universe is 14 billion years old. Civilizations could have risen and fallen 1,000 times over, their signals crisscrossing the void like ships in the night. The WOW signal might not be a mystery to solve. It might just be the first note in a symphony we're not equipped to hear. One day, another signal might come. Or it might not. That's the gamble of staring into the cosmos, the crushing weight of maybe. But for those 72 seconds, the universe didn't feel empty. It felt alive, and sometimes that's enough to keep listening. From the eerie Green Children of Woolpit to the bone-chilling final whisper of the Aurang Medan's crew, history's strangest moments refuse to be tucked neatly into textbooks. But if we had to choose the 5 most baffling, the dancing plague of 1518 takes the lead, a mass hysteria so contagious, it turned streets into stages of horror. Then there's the Taos Hum, an invisible drone heard only by its victims, a sound without a source that still vibrates through the New Mexico desert. The Tunguska event remains a cosmic gut punch, flattening 800 square miles of Siberian wilderness without leaving a crater, as if the sky itself threw a tantrum. And who could forget the Voynich Manuscript, a 600-year-old book written in a language no one's ever spoken, its pages filled with plants that don't exist and women bathing in emerald pipes. Finally, the Dyatlov Pass incident, where 9 hikers fled their tent into sub-zero darkness, only to be found with injuries that defy nature, broken ribs but no bruises, missing tongues, and clothing radioactive enough to spark Cold War panic. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment or hit the poll below. Which of these shreds your sanity the most? Was it the meat shower in Kentucky where the sky rained chunks of something disturbingly organic? Or the Toynbee tiles, those cryptic pavement messages begging someone something to resurrect the dead on Jupiter? And stay tuned, because next week we're diving deeper into the archives to uncover historical puzzles that make these look like child's play. Think lost cities, vanishing ships, and artifacts that shouldn't exist. But before you go, ask yourself this: which of these events do you think has a logical explanation waiting to be found? Or are some mysteries woven into the fabric of time, not to be solved, but to remind us how much we don't know? The truth is out there, or maybe it's not, and that's the real thrill.